as the public statements from government agencies come out trying to tell you about radiation and how it's good for you, or it really isn't that bad for you, and it's within so many 1,000% of the standard government limit within the, say, an X-ray or whatever, that is really false statements. The other thing is they would compare it to, say, an X-ray, or they would compare it to a flight on an airplane. That was one of the other comparisons. Well, you're not flying on an airplane 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. No. But you are eating, you're breathing air, you're drinking water every day. So it's not fair to compare a dose of radiation from a glass of milk to an airplane ride or to any other thing that you do occasionally. That's not a fair comparison, because kids drink milk every day. Okay? Mothers drink water, they drink, they're say exposed to other foods that could have radiation, and the radiation is working through their system. All of those reproductive organs are all centralized, and all of that food is passing right by the reproductive organs of the mother. So all of that food is within an inch, probably, of the fetus as it passes through the body. Now, don't tell me, government scientists, that you can compare this to an airline trip or an X-ray, because it is not true. False information coming from government-paid scientists. I really cannot stand them, as you can tell. So, at any rate, let's talk about some other types of pollution today. Chemicals, oil, other items in the water, and of course one thing I did an entire series of shows on a while back were drugs. The people take prescription drugs. We take tons of around, if you went around your town or city on a given day, there would be pounds, if not tons, of prescription drugs taken. And when they pass through the person's body after they've done whatever they do, those then pass out of the person's body. They go down into the water treatment plant where the water is recycled and it goes back into the groundwater. So you can find all of these chemicals in the groundwater. So people are taking, as they drink water, whether it's the city water, and remember that your city is completely unable to take this kind of thing out of water. What they try and do is maintain a safe, bacteria-free water and put it through the tubes to your house. Adding fluoride in as this hydrofluoric acid, as I said before, it's to your water so that it supposedly helps your teeth, and that's the story. Remember that in World War II, the Germans discovered that fluoride actually caused people to be kind of drunk and lethargic, and it was used to control people. It was put in the water to control people. So all of these issues coming out regarding fluoride, including the fact that, of course, the studies were done to tell you that fluoride is safe in your drinking water or in your toothpaste. These studies were done by the people that would benefit by the sale of this. So, at any rate, the drugs, pharmaceuticals, also in the drinking water. So, at any rate, the issue with radiation, I don't really know myself, and I'm trying to get what I would call real data on this. I'm trying to get real data on the cumulative situation with radiation from Japan. I don't think the government, which they do have the good equipment, I don't think they're telling the truth. And what tells me something is if you can already detect it in cow's milk within 20 days of the accident in Japan, that's a long ways away. I don't know if you've gone to Japan or flown there on an airline, but it's a long ways away. For something to carry over and be in enough concentration where it ends up on a glass of milk on your table within 20 days, there's a lot of radiation coming here. And so for the government also to tell you that, oh, the level of radiation in that glass of milk is pretty low and it's really not enough to worry about is tremendously misleading. What about the air you breathe? What about radiation on dust that's coming into the atmosphere? You put a lot of air through your lungs every day. There are many ways to accumulate this. What about the cow who eventually be butchered and sold as meat on the meat market after sitting and eating that radiation-laden grass for 2 or 3 years? What's going to happen to the beef there that they try and sell? What is it going to be like? What's the radiation level in that beef going to be like? And then the pregnant mother is going to eat the beef. That's going to pass through, as I say, through the digestive system within 1 inch of the unborn fetus, and on a daily basis that radiation is going to be passing through there. So for the government to come out and talk about this as if there were no problem at all, and it's a lot less than an average X-ray, there again, even if you did compare it favorably to an X-ray, they will not give X-rays to pregnant mothers. The reason being, even though they can put a lot of shielding around the mother's stomach, an errant X-ray can come and destroy the DNA in the unborn fetus and cause genetic damage. So none of this is adding up. This is what I'm trying to tell you. I particularly don't have good data, but as with many things, one thing I learned how to do, and I had to learn how to do it, was, say, for example, when NASA put out a spacecraft, and it went out to one of the planets, and the data came back. The instruments were designed by scientists who didn't know what they were doing. The scientists didn't understand about electric fields. They didn't understand how to interpret the data, and so the data would come back to just put it mildly, it was all messed up. So what I had to do is learn how to look through what they were doing to pull real information out of that, and that's what I'm doing right now. I'm doing that with what the government is trying to pawn off on you as information regarding radiation. Now, this is a sensitive issue because the public, there's kind of a pecking order here in which the government has its official story, and they want you to think that they're giving you the complete and unabridged story. So for someone to contradict that and say, this is really what the real story is because we're looking through the data, the information you're trying to put out, and it's bogus, it's twisted, it's not true, and it's not the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, if you understand what I'm saying. It's kind of the twisted government truth. So maybe some of the numbers they're using are accurate, but then they're not interpreting it, they're not looking at the long term, they're not looking at the cumulative effect of radiation, and they're only looking at a small piece of the data, and they're not giving you the full story. If there's iodine-131 in the milk, then there most likely are other types of radiation that they're not talking about. They're not talking about what's going to happen with the crops this summer, with the radiation continually blowing in from Japan. They're not talking about, and just in the Japan story itself, I am shocked and amazed at the lack of the human side of the coverage of news from Japan. We're hearing more about the rebels on the Ivory Coast in Africa than we are from Japan about the real story, what's happening with the people there. What's going on in Japan? We don't have any reports coming back from the human side of Japan. They talk about radiation levels here, but what are the radiation levels in Japan? What's happening with those people? How are they, within 20 days, most of the people there are not going to have water or safe water. If they do have water, they're not going to have food or an ongoing supply of food. How are these people going to manage? I don't see one word on that in any of the major news media. It's all about Libya and who's back and forth winning on the front between the so-called rebels and the whatever. You know, that's what's in the news media. You don't hear about the human side of Japan, and it's once again a failure of our news media, but maybe it's not just a failure, it's a planned disinformation outage. It just completely controlled news media. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to switch gears here. I wanted to start off with that information because it's so important. There's a lot of confusion out there, and a lot of people really are not sure what to do. And at this point, I would say the following, that from what I can tell right now, the radiation leaks in Japan are not going to go away. They will probably get worse, and there could be some explosive events there. Let's look at one of the, just cooling down a reactor. If you have a reactor that is hot, let's put it that way, it was in production when the tsunami and when the earthquake hit, some of the plants were able to shut down a little bit or partially, but the heat that then is contained in there is not removed. That heat has to go someplace, and the ongoing reaction is continuing, which means there's a buildup of heat and there's no cooling process going on. Eventually that's going to start to steam and leak out and get into the atmosphere. My suspicion is that this is ongoing in Japan. It will get worse, and some of these plants eventually will just melt a hole in the containers and just start spewing this out on an ongoing basis for hundreds of years, not just now. If we are already detecting radiation 20 days after the event, imagine in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, what's going to happen with the accumulation levels of radiation. This radiation is not going to go away. For scientists to say that it only has an 8-day half-life is very irresponsible, because if it's building up at a rate faster than 8 days, then if you're doubling your amount of radiation in less than 8 days, then the accumulation is positive, and the radiation is going to continue going on. Another issue is that with fast decaying radiation, the level of radiation is much higher, much quicker. And so to try and tell you that a short half-life radiative particle is better is counterintuitive, because it has a higher level of radiation and it happens much faster. So, and if it's accumulating, you've got a radiation problem that's not going to go away. It's going to be in your, if it's already showing up in cow's milk on the glass on your table, it's going to be building up in that cow. After 20 days, it's already built up in that cow, possibly to dangerous levels. And after a year, after 2 years at that, and then plus the cumulative effect, those cows are going to be, let's put it this way, unsafe to eat by anybody's standards. This is the part that the government is not telling you. And so when I read these articles, all I can do is shake my head, because it's clear that these are cover stories. And so anyway, the question then remains, what is a person to do? This is something that I somewhat anticipated by the pre-filter. I believe that people at this point have to become prepared for long term. And I've been talking about this for years and years. I talked about preparation for Planet X type scenarios, this type of thing, but preparation is the same, no matter whether it might be a Planet X object. And as far as that information, I don't have any more news today about Planet X than I did a number of years ago.